Hello, in this presentation we will compare QuickBooks Online versus QuickBooks Desktop. Hello, in this presentation we will create a budgeted profit and loss within QuickBooks Online. We will have a comprehensive QuickBooks Online course soon, if not available yet. We also have a comprehensive Excel course which complements the QuickBooks courses and a QuickBooks Pro desktop version course you can find at the link below. Here we are in the QuickBooks Online dashboard. We will be continuing with the Get Great Guitars problem. We're going to be looking at a budget, specifically the budget related to a profit and loss or income statement type report. In order to get started, we'll first take a look at a financial statement for the income statement and talk about the budgeting process. Then we'll go in and create the budget. So we're going to go to the reports on the left side. We're going to go to the profit and loss. Here is the profit and loss, or we can type in profit and loss into the window there. We will then select the date. We're really going to look at the month of February. So 02/28, let's make it 02/01/21. This is going to be the month we will be working with, 02/28/21. And so it's going to be February 1st, 2021 to February 28th, 2021. And we will run that report. Here is our report for the month of February. Now, when we're thinking about the budget, of course, we are going to be budgeting forwards. And we won't get into all the concepts of different types of budgetings and ways that we can budget and the best ways to think about budgets. What we will say is that even though we should be projecting into the future, really the first place we start oftentimes is going to be something of what happened in the past. So we're looking at our income statement, we're looking at what will happen in the future, and the last month is a decent starting point to think about what will happen next month. So that's why we're starting here. We're just taking a look at our income statement. Here's our revenue, cost of goods sold, and our expenses. What we will do is now create a monthly budgeted profit and loss and think about and project what we think is going to happen in the next month and in the rest of the year here using that budgeting process. Now, again, that being said, the fact that we use past data to project out in the future, that's a very simplified budget. We really want to adjust for that and make any kind of forward-looking adjustments to say things like increasing in revenue or what other type of expenses or things we might be investing in the future as well. And we'll take a look at how to do that. Some of those changes just in terms of logistically, how do we put that into the system in terms of QuickBooks. So we're going to start the budget here. To do that, we're going to go up top to this little cog item. And then we are looking for the budgeting option within this information. So we've got the budgeting option. It's under Tools and Budgeting. We'll select that item. And so we're going to add our first budget. So if you don't have anything in here yet, you'll have this little add button. We're going to add things in the first budgeting option. Now we're going to make this a bit generic. We're just going to call it the budget. And we're going to call it 2021. And I'm going to change the date to the realm that we're working in. We're, of course, are working in the future. So it would probably be picking the correct date range if we were working in real time and current time. We here are going to be going January 2021 to December 2021. And we're going to have a monthly budget that we will be entering, and we're going to have data will not be pre-filled. Now this option is kind of nice that it will give you that information. It'll say, hey, do you want me to take the data from last year and put it in here? And then you can kind of make adjustments from there. That could save time. We're just going to build it from scratch and just show how to put this information into the system from scratch. So we have here, as we can see, our income statement amounts. We are dealing with the income statement. Now there should be a preview item across the screen, and then if there's a next button down here, you want to select the next button, and then we'll have the actual input screen. So we'll have the budget up top. Then we'll have our income statement amounts, and we'll be able to put the input information here. We are, in essence, putting this information, kind of copying what we had in February, that being our full month. And we're going to put that in for the full year, all the way January through December. And that'll give us a year's worth of data, so we can compare month by month and year-to-date information. So we're going to scroll down here, and the first item we're going to have is sale of products. So we're going to have a lot of some blank items because this is taking everything from our chart of accounts. If we're not using some accounts, we might want to go to the chart of accounts and clean that up and delete some of those items. but we are just going to go through here and into the data that we have information for. So we're going to say 500 to the sale of product income. Now, if we believe that number is going to be static all the way through, we could just select this little icon and that'll basically copy it through to the end and give us our total. If we believe it's going to go up in value, as we do here, we're going to say there's a 15% increase. We're just going to have to go, we're going to go through here and just tab through this and say that January it's going to be that, and then February it's going to be 575, and then 661.25. I'm tabbing through this, 760.44, 874.51, 1005.69, 1156.54, 1330.02, 1529.52, and 1758.95, and then 2022.79. So we're just going to copy through the whole thing and put in those adjusted numbers within the system. The last one here is going to be 2326. So that's a bit of a tedious type of activity. All we did there is basically increase it, I believe, by the 15%. So we're saying it's going to increase by 15% through the process. And as of now, we got to put that information in there manually. So if it's the same number all the way across, we can enter the same number. If we have to adjust them for increases or decreases to the budget, then we're going to need to make those adjustments. We're going to do the same for the rent of music equipment. We're going to say that it's 1,000, we believe, for January. And if we wanted to just copy that across, again, we just copy that across. But if we think it's going to go up or have a change, in this case, we're going to say it's going to go up by $1,000, then we'd have to actually go through here and tab through and say it's 2,000 here. And then if we tab through this information, so I've just made those adjustments here, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. We're thinking it's going to increase by that $1,000 all the way through this process. Then we had the service income. So we're going to have service income down here, and we're going to budget for the service income starting with 2,500. And once again, we're going to say we could just copy it across, but if it changes, we'll have to manually input that. So if we copied it across, it would look like this. If we make the change, we're going to go in there and increase it by $500 for each month. So we've entered that information. Again, the best way to do that is really just to tab through this. So you want to tab through and just enter the data through as you go. Then the next side we're going to go is the cost of goods sold. So we're going to take a look at the cost of goods sold. So we're going to scroll down a bit and get down to the cost of goods sold. And it'll have the same information. Now the cost of goods sold, we're going to increase it in the same format that we did the merchandise sales, because it should be linked to the merchandise sales. So if our profit margin is the same all the way through, then we should have a similar increase in the cost of goods sold as we do for the sale of merchandise. So we're going to say here it's 400. And again, we could just copy that across like so, but it's going to increase as we did the increase, which I believe was a 15% increase for the merchandise income. So this is going to increase in a similar way to 460, tab, and then we'll tab through this information as well. So here's our information for the cost of goods sold. Now we're going to go down through the expenses, which are typically a little bit easier because they typically are things that we can just copy across. They'll typically be the same from month to month. We're going to start with the bank service charge. It's going to be 120 that we're going to estimate, and I'm just going to copy that all the way across. So we have the 120 all the way across. Then we've got I'm going to enter that. We're going to say that there's depreciation. So I'm going to scroll down here. Now the depreciation we put down here, I'm going a little bit out of order. It's in the other expenses. So I'm going to say that one is going to be next. And I'm going to say that is going to be 775. And then again, we'll just copy the depreciation across. We're going to then go back up. I'm going to hit enter. So it goes back down to the next row. Then we are going to be looking for the insurance. Insurance expense. I'm going to scroll back up. Just look for the insurance expense. And here we have it. So January insurance expense, we're going to say is 1,000. And I'm just going to copy that across. So the 1,000 will go all the way across. And enter. And then the next item is interest expense. And I believe that's up top. We put that up here. So interest paid, we'll say interest expense is 300. We're going to copy that all the way across and enter. And then the next item is the internet. So internet expense right here. And we're going to say that that's going to be 150. We'll copy that all the way across, the 150. Then we have payroll, so we'll scroll down here to payroll, and we'll say that's going to be 6,000, and copy that all the way across. Then we have telephone, and we select enter, so we're on the next line, or else it gets kind of messy. Then we're looking for the telephone expense. Telephone expense is going to be down here, and that's going to be 360, and we'll copy that across for the telephone expense, and enter. Then we'll have the utilities. I'm going to scroll down to the utilities expense, and that's going to be down here, utilities expense. And we're going to say that's 650, copy that across, and enter. So if we scroll back up, we've got the payroll, and then we have got the utilities. So that's what we're going to enter. There's a lot of empty cells here, and we're not going to put everything into every category. One, we might not be using that category. If we're not using the line item at all, we might want to eliminate it. And two, it might be something that's not really significant to the budget for whatever reason, and not in terms of dollar amount, it might not be large enough for us to be budgeting for. And so we're just going to keep it as is here. We'll save this, we'll take a look at it, and if we need to make any changes, we'll come back here and make those changes. So we're going to first say save this information, and then we'll go to the reports. I'm going to close this back out. We're going to go to the reports on the left side here. We're going to type in budget, so we'll type in budget into the window. We're looking for the overview first of all, so we're going to take a look at the budget overview, and we'll select this report. So the date ranges that we have here, we're going to say are going to be, we'll say for the quarter, of 01/01/21 to 03/31/21, and that'll give us a quarter's worth of information, and it is the budgeted, that's the correct one, and let's run that report. And here we have our budgeted information for the 3-month time period, January, February, and March, and we have the total, of course, summing these up for that quarter's period of time. It is looking like a typical income statement, a typical profit and loss. Here's the net income budgeted for the 3 months and the quarterly. Now I'm going to go ahead and go back in here and change this bank service charge. We're going to say, okay, we made an adjustment. We think after going back and forth, as typically will be done oftentimes when budgeting, we're going to make a change. I'm going to change this $120 to $30. So to do that, we're going to go back to this little cog over here, and we're going to go down to the budgeting. So we're going to go to the budget item, and we'll select this budget. That's the one that we want to edit. I'm going to say edit on the right side. We're going to edit this budget. And then I'm going to look for that bank service charge just to see that we can go in here and make any type of adjustments. This 120, I'm going to go through here and just make that 30 and copy that across. And that'll give us a new total. That'll be the only change we'll take a look at right now, and we'll just enter that, make sure we're on the next line to make sure it saves it, and then save it, and then close this back out. And then we're going to go back to our reporting by going to reports. We're going to select the budget. It's going to be the budget overview we want. And the date range, once again, we're going to say that's going to be right, 01/01/21 to 03/31/21. January 1st, 2021 to March 31st, 2021, the first quarter. And then we're going to run that report. And then we've made this adjustment down here. So we can go back and forth and adjust this $30 and make any type of adjustments we need to do within these budgets, and that'll adjust the total net income as well. Let's go ahead and print this thing out. So we're going to go to, or export it. We're going to export it. So we will export this to Excel. We're going to open up that Excel document. And here we have our information. Now we're just going to save this. We're going to save this to wherever we want to put this. So we'll go to the File tab. We're going to go to the Save As within the File tab. And we're going to say Browse to locate the folder we want to save in. We're going to put this into Excel Docs 11. That's what we're going to name the folder. It's going to have the name of the company, and it's got the name of the report. We may want to adjust this and shorten it down, take the name of the company out, possibly put the date first, but I'm just going to keep the default here. So we're going to keep that default. And there is the budget overview report. The other useful report is, of course, the budget versus actual report. So what we budget, what we think was going to happen compared to what did actually happen. This report then would be run after the time period has been run, so we have some actual data there. So we, of course, have actual data for January and February. So we will run a budget. So we're going to go to the reports on the left side, and then we're going to type in budget, and you should have the two reports, budget versus actual, the one we want at this time. We're going to select that budget versus actual, and then we're going to scroll back up top. We only want the first 2 months, not the full quarter, because we only have 2 months of actual data that we have input at this point. So we're going to say 01/01/21/02/28/21, January 1st, 2021 to February 28th, 2021, and run that report. So here we have our information, January and February, and we have our detail. And it gives us some nice information in terms of what actually happened. This is from the data that we input. This is from the budget that we input for January. This then is going to be the difference in terms of dollar amounts, and then the difference in terms of percentages. So this is really important to have both of those. It's nice to have both of those because these percentage changes we could then use to compare to similar companies that have different dollar amounts, whereas the dollar amounts wouldn't be as comparable to companies of a different scale, of a different size. We then have the same information for February, and then we have the total information giving us that comparison as well. So a report like this can look pretty intimidating to look at this kind of report because it's got a lot of numbers on it, but it's not. If you take it one piece at a time, it's just an income statement, and then it's going to have the comparison of the actual income statement, the budget, two income statements, the difference between the two, and then the percentage. Now the percentage is a little bit different than we might think if we're comparing like two income statements. We would take the change. This would be like the change if we were going from January to February, and then take the change divided by the original number. Here we're going to take the actual number, which happened 2467.4. That's what actually happened, and divide it by the budgeted number 500. And in this case, if we move the decimal 2 places to the right, 493. So that's obviously a lot different in January. January, our first month of operations. So the budget might be a little bit different. So then we have the 508 divided by the 2500, and that'll give us our change here. So 20.32. And again, I know we put this information into the budget just basically to show how to put that information in, so the numbers may not be exact compared to this particular business or the best budgeting process that we could have had through this. And of course, if it's the first month of operations, that could often be the case. There could be a lot of changes, and in that time period, the budget might not be the most stable of things. But in any case, that's the comparison. We're going to go ahead and export this to Excel as well. So we're going to select the export option, export to Excel. Here's our worksheet, and we're going to open that up. Here is our budget versus actual report. If we take a look at the printing options here, it's always a good idea to look at the printing options. We'll go to the page layout on the bottom right. See what that looks like. There's a big line or a cut right between the middle of it. That's not good. So we're going to go back to the normal view. And we see that's where the page break's going to be, and we would rather not have a page break right down the middle of the columns. So first thing we do to try to fix that, we're going to go to the page layout view. We're going to go to the setup tab, select the orientation, and move it from the portrait to landscape. So here's the landscape orientation. Does a better job. It's almost there, not quite there. Best way to fix it from here would be to kind of adjust the columns, but it looks like there's kind of a lot of data. It might not be doable. We're going to use the kind of cheat function here. We're going to go to the side, and we're going to try to force this to work by going to the side, I should say. We're going to go to the File tab, and then we're going to go down to the printing options. And I'm going to pull this up just a little bit on the window because we're looking down here to the scaling option. So I'm going to pull this up just a little bit so we can then scroll down and see the scaling option. Here it is. It's going to have a drop down. So when we drop down, we don't want to fit to one page necessarily. I'll choose that just to show. If we do that, it makes it very small, possibly. And we might want it more than one page long. It fits it on one page wide. That's what we want. But I don't really care if it goes 2 pages long. So I would rather fit to all columns to one page, not the entire thing. And in this case, it works out to be the same, but it may not if it had a lot of data going from the up and down portion. And there we have it. Now note that if you use that option, you don't really have any control over the font size or anything. And if you're printing multiple reports, then your font's going to be all messed up in different sizes. But it does fit on one page, and that's better than having 2 pages. So that's what we're going to go with. We're going to go back to this area here. And now let's save this. So we're going to go to the File tab once again. And we're going to say Save As. And then browse for the location we want to put this information. We will put this into Excel Docs 11. So that's going to be where we're going to save this. I'm just going to keep the name the same. We might want to adjust it in practice to put to shorten this would be probably pretty good. But I'm going to keep it there. That's just the default. To shorten it, I would suggest having the date and then removing the name of the company possibly and whatnot. So anyway, save that. And there we have it. So those are the 2 reports, budget versus actual and overview. Hello. In this presentation, we will create a budget, profit and loss, or budgeted income statement within QuickBooks Pro 2018. If you've been following along with us, we will be continuing with the Get Great Guitar problem. If not, that's okay. We will be discussing on how to create a budget within QuickBooks Pro 2018 using the profit and loss budget first. If you have the backup file up to this point, you can restore that by going to the file and restore the backup. We currently have the Open Windows tab open. To open the Open Windows tab, go to View and Open Windows List. We also have the Home tab open at this time, which can be found at the company and home page. We are going to, at this point, create a budget. First off, we would like to take a look at what we have so far in data. So we have Get Great Guitars. We've entered 2 months of data. Let's take a look at the profit and loss and think of that at the base point for our budget. There's many different ways that we can start to think about how we're going to use a budget, how we should put together, we should plan the budget. We'll talk just a little bit about that, but we're really going to get into the function of how to actually make the budget within QuickBooks and then use it to make some reports and use some comparisons within QuickBooks. So let's go to Reports. And we're going to go down to Company and Financial, and we're looking for the Profit and Loss Standard. And we're going to look at the month of February because that's more the full month that we have seen so far in terms of our data. So we're going to select Tab and say 02/28/21 and let's make it as of the beginning of the month. So 02/01, so February 1st, 2021 to 02/28/21. February 1st, 2021 to February 28th, 2021. This is really the first full month of data. We started in January, but we really got going in February. So this is the start of the data that we really would start our budget on next month. In next month and the rest of the year, we're really going to look at what happened in the past, and what we believe will happen in the future, and use some type of projections in order to do that. In our budget, what we're going to do is enter the data actually from January on so that we can then have some reports that we're going to report. So we're going to use this data to enter the budget as of January, even though we've already entered the data for January and then February, and then project out in the future and show some of the functions that QuickBooks has in order to put in that data. If we were starting at this point in time, we may just use this data to start at February and then move forward from there. There could be some reasons why we would want to enter data in January and February so that we can have a year's comparison when we move on to the following year. But in essence, we're going to use this data to put into January and February and then print some reports so that we can see what the budgeted versus the actual would be. So let's go ahead and make the profit and loss budget. We're going to go to the drop-down tab up top where it says Company, and we're going to scroll down to the Planning and Budgeting icon. We want to set up budgets, so we're going to set up budgets. And we're going to get this window to set them up. Now, we're going to be in the future, of course, so I'm going to be in 2021. We have 2 options. We have the profit and loss and the balance sheet. We want to stay with the profit and loss this time. Profit and loss really is kind of the traditional main piece of the budget because that's what we're measuring performance by. How are we going to do in terms of performance? So we're going to say next on that. No additional criteria. So we're going to keep this here. Next. and create budget from scratch. That's what we will be doing. We're going to create it from scratch. If we have the prior data, however, we may want to try to use that data in order to be the base point for us to start the budget here, and then we can move on from there. But we're going to create this from scratch and say finish, and this will be our budget. Now, in essence, we're going to be putting the budget from January to December. That's going to be the budget that will be set up by QuickBooks based on when our year end is. So we decided here our year end was a December 31st year end, traditional year end, and therefore they're giving us that 12-month time period for the budget. We could start here in March given the fact that we've entered data for January and February. But what we want to do is put in data for the entire year for a couple of reasons. One, we want to be able to have a comparison so that when we run reports, we can have comparative reports. And it is sometimes useful to have data for the entire year as well when we start doing comparisons year over year. So that's what we're going to do. In essence, when we make the budget, we're going to look at the profit and loss, this being our full profit and loss in February when we had a full month of activity, and really take that data and try to adjust it to what we think is going to happen in the future based on future activities and what we plan to happen. But we typically start with that base point. So in essence, that's what we're going to do here. However, we're going to be entering the data into January. So I'm going to start by entering this data line by line. We're going to start entering data just line by line. And so we're going to have the first one, merchandise inventory or merchandise sales. This is our sales item. I'm going to say 500. Now we're going to assume that it's going to increase throughout the time period, and there's a couple different ways that we could do that. We could manually put in what we think is going to happen each month, or we can use some type of increasing function within QuickBooks who has some basic functions that we could use. QuickBooks does. So we could copy it across. That would have the same amount. If we think it's going to change, we can have the adjust row amounts down here. So we're going to use adjust row amounts for this particular item. And we can say we want to adjust the first month or the current month we are on. We want to select the currently selected month. If we select the currently selected month, we then should have this enable compounding item down here. And that's what we want to see. So we then could increase this by either a percentage, or we could decrease it by a percentage, or by a dollar amount, increase or decrease by a dollar. And if we want to increase it by a percentage, we just need to leave the percentage sign. If we want to increase it by a dollar amount, then we would remove the percentage sign. So we're going to have the increase by a percentage here for the merchandise sales. And one reason to have that is that we would think that the merchandise sales would increase at the same percentage as the cost of goods sold. And so if we just increase by the same percentage, we can keep that relationship the same. So I'm going to say this is going to increase 15%. Now, I want to have it compound, so I don't want it to just increase 15% next time. I want to increase 15% each time and compound throughout the year. So we're going to have that be the compounding, and so we check this item here to do that and say OK. And then we should have 500 increasing 15% each month. So we have a steady increase of the 15% for the merchandising sales each month. We're going to go to the rent music equipment. That's going to be another revenue account. We're going to estimate $1,000 a month here. And I'm not going to copy it across again. We're going to say that this is going to increase. So we're going to adjust the amounts. And we're going to have the current selected month. However, this time I'm going to delete the dollar sign, and I'm going to increase it by a dollar amount of 1,000. And I'm going to say that that's going to increase compound as well. So we'll say OK, and there's the dollar amount. It's increasing by $1,000 each month. So we had 1,000 of revenue by the end of December. We're hoping that that will be at 12,000 in the month. Then we're going to have the sales discount, which I'm going to skip the sales discount. And that's an account that was not on our profit and loss. We didn't use it last time period, but it is on the list of accounts given to us by QuickBooks. And if we don't like some of those accounts and we don't think we're going to use some of them, we might want to go through that list and delete some of them so that we don't have to deal with them in something like this. We're going to say then that the service revenue is going to be estimated at 2.5, And I'm going to go down here and do the same, adjust rows. And we're going to say current month, and I'm going to say that is going to increase by a set dollar amount of 500. So we'll say OK, and then we have a $500 increase across the months here. We're not going to put anything into the uncategorized income. We're then going to go to the cost of goods sold, next item, and we're going to put 400 there. And that's going to increase by that same 15% we put in the sales. So we're going to go to adjust rows amount, and we will adjust the current, and we're going to make that a percentage by not deleting the percentage sign, and make that a 15% increase, enable compounding, and OK. So that increases 15% across the board. And then we're just going to put in the rest of the stuff, and we're just going to copy most of these across. So we have the bank service charge, and we're going to put $10. And I'm just going to copy that across. I want that to just be the same. All we need to do then is say copy across, and we get the same report all the way across. And then we want to go to depreciation. So depreciation in January, we're going to put 775, and then just copy that across. That's going to be the same all the way across. And then insurance, we're going to say that's $1,000, and then copy that across. That's going to be the same all the way across. And then interest expense, we're going to put 300, and we're going to copy that across. Then we'll have internet expense of 150. Just copy that across. We're going to go down to payroll expense, 6,000. We'll copy that across. We've got telephone expense, scrolling down to telephone expense, 350. Copy that across. And then utilities, scrolling down to utilities, 650. Copy that across. So those are going to be the items that we're going to have. Again, we have some other items here that are not filled out, and we may look at that if we have the chart of accounts, and that might give us some ideas of some other items we're missing here. But if we're not looking at using those, we could go in and delete those from the budget. They won't show up on the budget if there's a zero in there, just like they won't show up on our reports when there's nothing in those account balances. Once we have completed this process, we're going to say save and OK and close that back out, and then we could take a look at some of the reports that have been generated. To do that, we're going to go to the reports drop-down up at the top. We're going down to budgets, so we're going to select the budgets item, and we're going to look first at the budget overview. We're going to keep it at the profit and loss rather than changing to the balance sheet. It's our only option at this point. It's our only budget we have a report for. We're going to say next, and it's going to be account by month and next, and then click finish, and we will do so. So here is our report. Now it's going to show us the entire year. We've got January through December, and then it'll give us the totals there. There's a few ways we can obviously manipulate this report. One way being we might just want to see the first 3 months. That's the activity we have so far. So we're going to give those first 3 months and see what we've got. So it's at January 1st, 2021 to 03/31/21. So January 1st, 2021 to March 31st, 2021. And this is what we believe will happen in that first quarter, those first 3 months. We've already got data for the first 2, so we can look at a comparison from there and then through March. And so here is our data through that time period. We can see that we do have a loss as of the end of that time period, given the fact that mainly our payroll is fairly high in comparison. So if we were to bring this out through the whole year, if we change this back out, if we make the end date 12/31/21, then we could see that we're recording the first few years, first few months, that we're going to have this loss. And then that's typical for many startup businesses to have losses even in the first year or 2. And then we're hoping that the trend will increase and we'll have revenue towards the end. If we total it up, we're closing out the year with 32,000, or about 33,000 of income as projected over the entire year. So this is our first year of operations, of course, and we've got the losses that are projected in the first quarter. And so if we take a look at that first quarter again, bring that down to 03/31/21, here is that first quarter. And we're going to go ahead and export this report to Excel. So in order to do that, we're going to go to Excel up top. We're going to create new worksheet. We will also have a new workbook, this being the first workbook that we are exporting to for this new project, this new section. So we're going to say export. That should open up Excel. It should create a tab within Excel and then export this data to that tab. Once it does so, then we're going to go in there and make a few adjustments to that tab, including we're going to adjust the tab name and we're going to adjust the view. So I'm going to go to the view tab over here and we're going to go to the windows and split. We're going to unsplit it and then go down to the layout view down here. I'm going to bring this up and the layout view. And we can see that the name is up top. That's what we would expect. Going back down to the normal view, here is our information. We're going to rename the tab by double clicking on the tab, and then we're going to call it P and L, profit and loss budget. So profit and loss budget. I'm going to click off of that. I'm going to go ahead and save this report. So I'm going to go to File tab up top. We're going to save as, browse, locate where we would like to save it. I'm going to put it on the desktop and look for the folder that we have been working with. Going to Get Great Guitars. We're in section 11 and we're going to just call it a section 11 reports and save, and yes. I typically like to close this out as we go to the next report. So I'm going to close this out and we're going to go to the next report for the budgeting reports drop down. And we're going down to the budgets, scrolling down to budget versus actual. This is the other kind of standard report that we would want to see, the budget versus the actual. And we're going to say next here, next there, and finish. And so here we have our budget versus actual. This is for the year. And of course we have no data for anything after January and February. So if we look at January and February, we've got the budget amount and the actual amount, and the actual amount and the budget amount, and then it shows the differences. So of course we don't have any differences or any actual in March. So we really only have those 2 months of data where we can compare the budget versus actual. What we'll do is change the dates from January 1st, 2021 to 02/28/21. So January 1st, 2021 to February 28th, 2021. If we scroll back to January, we can take a look at some of these numbers. We're actually going to take a look at February because that's the first full month we've actually had. If we scroll through here, we can try to line up this report to just February. So we'll scroll over to February. This is what actually happened. This is the budget. This is the difference. This is the percentage change. So if we take those numbers, we can then calculate this out. We have what actually happened, 2500, minus the budget, 575 for the merchandise sales, giving us the difference of 1,925. This percentage can be calculated as what happened, the 2500, the actual, divided by the budget amount of 575, that giving us the 4.34, if we make that a percent, moving the decimal 2 places to the right or multiplying times 100, we get that 434.80. So that's going to be that amount there. And we could do this comparison all the way through here. The total income was 16,300 versus the 5,575. The difference is the 10,000, so it's a fairly large difference in February. And if we go through here, then we've got the cost of goods sold difference, the 2,000 actual versus the budget. And then if you look at all the expenses down here, we have more of a static in terms of the expenses. So these are going to be flat rates, so the 20 versus the 10, and the 20, of course, is something that we would expect to be fairly constant more through the expenses. So oftentimes the expenses are going to be divided out fairly constantly throughout the year. The depreciation should be the same because it shouldn't change much. If it's a straight line depreciation, we should know what that is unless we buy more equipment. And then we've got the insurance expense, the interest, the internet expense difference, miscellaneous, the payroll expense difference being the 200, and the telephone expense and the utilities. Now, if you wanted to go back through these reports and make some changes, make some adjustments to them, then you could do so. You can go back to the company and go back to the balance sheet. We're looking for the planning and budgeting, set up budgets, and then it'll go back to that last budget you were on. If we want to create a new one, we would create a new budget up here, but we can go back and we can tweak some of these numbers. Like it looks like we may want to do that in our case, given the budget versus the actual, reassess what actually happened and make some changes in terms of what we believe to be happening in the future, what will happen in the future. We're now going to go back to the budget versus actual and just print this report out or export it to that same Excel workbook that we had set up. So we're going to go back to the report in the open windows. We'll go to the Excel tab and we're going to create a new worksheet, but we will put it into the existing workbook, and we'll make sure that we're going to the correct workbook. So we're going to browse, select the drop down, go to the workbook we want, section 11, and open that up and then export. It should then open up that Excel sheet we had set up in the prior export. It should create a new tab, and within that new tab it should export this information. Once it does so, we will make our normal adjustments, one being to adjust the tab name, the other being to adjust the view of it, and then we're going to adjust any kind of page layout problems we will need. So here it is. I'm going to move this over to the right hand side so that we have it profit and loss and then the balance sheet. I'm sorry, profit and loss and then the profit and loss versus actual. So we're going to say P and L, double clicking and changing the name, budget versus actual. And I'm going to say OK. We're going to go back up to the top. We're going to say View and Windows, unsplit the panes. I'm going to go and view the header down here by going to the Page Layout View, observing the header at the top, going back to the normal view, and then seeing if we can change this and fit it onto one page wide by going to the File tab, Print Reports, and then we'll start by making it landscape. So we're going to change it from portrait orientation to landscape and see if that does it. It doesn't quite do it. So what we're going to do is go back over here. We can delete some of the columns. I'm going to do this at one time by selecting the columns I want to delete and then holding down Control. All these columns have no data in them. So if we delete them, we should be okay in trying to get this report to fit on one page. So I'm going to highlight them all. Let's see if I can do this at one time. Highlight all the columns that are not relevant to this report, like so. Once we have done so, then we can double click or right click on one of those highlighted areas and delete. And that doesn't quite do it as well, so we could now go back through. See, this is where it's going to print. We could go back through and adjust some of the column settings, or we can go to the File tab, we could go to Print, and we can change the scale down here to make it fit on one page, fit all columns on one page. I don't want to fit everything on one page, just the columns, and that'll kind of force it to fit on one page wide, so fit all columns on one page. Note that it does make it a lot smaller of text, so you want to be careful in doing that. If you can do that, if you can fit it on one page without doing that, by using some other, adjusting the columns yourself, it's probably better to do that. I'm going to go back out here, and then we're going to just save this, and that'll be the end of this presentation.